Conor McMorrow reporting, and Maureen O'Sullivan, will begin with you because of course you represent Dublin Central. Let's start with what Enda Kenny said in the Dáil this week. He said, "I as a person cannot stop this feud." If that's true, what can politicians do?
Well, what it requires is a collective, collaborative approach to this whole issue, both in the short term and in the long term. So in the short term, what is needed to give people confidence is a more visible policing presence, and the police are doing that. Nobody wants to have an armed response on each corner, but that will be important while this feud continues. There has to be efforts made to bring the feud to an end. We are good in this country at conflict resolution and mediation. There are really skilled people who have worked under the radar on these issues. We have to go after the money because that is crucial to it, and there has to be international cooperation on that. The other two aspects would be, one is on the arms trade, and there's far easier access to arms today than, say, when the heroin epidemic broke out in the 80s and when people took to the streets and the marches and keeping watch at night. The other one is on the internet, because we see that is where a lot of the tablets are coming in, which is a scourge in the inner city at the moment. So there are some of the short-term ones. We've had numerous task forces, we've had numerous strategic programmes and policies. What we need now to go with whatever task force is set up, and it has to be at a high level with representatives from the various affected departments who would have direct access to their ministers. It has to be driven by somebody, I think, from the Department of the Taoiseach with the community and voluntary sector. But there must be an implementation monitoring group that will evaluate whatever the programmes and the actions are. And if something is not working, if it's not reaching the target that it should be reaching, then we have to be brave enough to say, OK, we'll stop that, we'll look at something else. But we know what to do. All the recommendations are there. Those who have been involved in the communities are there. Many of them are there since the heroin came out in the 80s. So we know what needs to be done, what has to be done. It's doing it because the recommendations have been made.
Before I go to Regina Doherty, how would you go after the money?
Well, this is where, because some of the money is outside of this country, so there has to be international cooperation with that at EU level, because we know, and this is the horrible part of it, is that these dealers have bled the communities dry, not just going out and murdering people, but also the way in which they have turned young people into addicts, people who had great potential. So they've taken everything from these communities.
So how do we hit their money?
We hit their money by, there has to be an international group, and our Minister for Finance and Minister for Justice have to engage with their counterparts in Europe so that other countries in Europe are not havens for this money. And we know the millions and even billions that are to be made from drugs. On the lower level, there has been a call going back a few years now for this type of minicabs. What that means is more profilers who will go after the lower and the middle ranking, because they're the ones who are the role models, unfortunately, for young people, because they see the lavish lifestyle that they have.
Just on that minicab suggestion, which has been around for quite a while, Regina Doherty, one resident of Avondale Flats wrote a letter I heard on the radio this week talking about, you know, local drug dealers, local drug lords, you know, driving by. Young guys see them, they're driving big fancy jeeps, they've got their water skis in the back, they're going off on 3-month holidays. This is the role model that these young children are growing up with. Why wasn't this done yesterday?